what generally people think about when they think about marijuana. They think about it as a plant. They think about it as something that's relatively harmless, like it's not as bad as opium, or it's not as bad as heroin, or it's not as bad as crack. It sort of has the reputation of it's just weed. It doesn't hurt you. One of the problems with this drug is exactly that. People don't really understand it very well. Currently, a third of high school people after grade 10 have used this drug. 20% are using it regularly. And regular use of this drug causes trouble. The main reason that it causes trouble is that it's fat soluble, which makes it different from most of the pretty much all the other drugs that fall into the kind of drugs that people take to change how they feel. Most drugs are water soluble, which makes them work differently in your body. What's the drug in beer? Alcohol. Right. Alcohol is a water-soluble drug. The half-life of alcohol is 30 minutes, which means if you drank a beer right now, in 30 minutes, half of that alcohol, after it was absorbed into your system, would already be processed and be gone. It's turned into a variety of substances, mostly by your liver, and then you just urinate it out. In 2 hours from one beer, your blood alcohol will be down to 0. Water-soluble drugs come out of your system really quickly. Fat-soluble drugs, the drug in marijuana is fat-soluble. Its half-life, anybody know what it is? Half-life of THC?
3 days.
3 days, 2 to 3 days. It takes about 21 days for the THC from one joint of marijuana to get down for your THC to completely get out of your body. It takes about 21 days if you smoke one joint of marijuana. If you've been using it regularly for any period of time beyond a year, and regular is like, you know, daily or 4 or 5 times a week, it can take as long as 2 years for it to completely get out of your system. It's really easy to get caught up in all of the pop culture stuff about marijuana. There's lots of movies, lots of songs. All of it glorifies marijuana use. None of it really looks at what is actually happening to us, the downside of this drug. It's a drug that acts on your brain, and if you think that you're going to use this drug, you really need to know what is it doing to you. The brain, if we take a look at the brain, if that's a brain cell, the little wall around the cell is made out of fat, and that's where THC likes to go. The way the brain works is it sends messages using neurotransmitters from inside one cell over to another cell. This will send a message back saying, yeah, I heard you. And then this will send a message off saying, we got to do something. Everybody put one hand up in the air. Perfect, now you can put them down. That took about 1 million of these little messages flying back and forth. Because first of all, your brain had to interpret the sound into a word, and then it had to send the little word down to its brain dictionary to look the word up, and then it had to reassemble the sentence that I said to figure out what he said, and then you had to make a decision. Do I want to put my hand up in the air? Am I going to look stupid if I put my hand up in the air? Is everybody else putting their hands up in the air? Okay, I'm going to put my hand up in the air, and you put your hand up in the air. So this happened about 1 million times in that under a second that it took you to put your hand up in the air. Now, when you start to use that drug, because it's fat soluble, it starts to collect in areas of fat. If you smoke weed for 3 months, 1 time a week, which isn't very much, and take a look at what's going on in the cell walls of your brain, you will see little deposits of THC. At that level, it doesn't really cause much trouble. It's there, but we don't perceive it as doing anything different. We don't see that you're changing. We don't see that you're losing interest in things. We don't see anything other than we see little deposits of THC. Now, if we bump up the frequency a bit, and we go to 2 times a week, and what happens when you're using 2 times a week, because this drug has a long half-life, 2 to 3 day half-life, if you smoke weed on Saturday and then you smoke weed again on Wednesday, 50% of the weed, the THC in the weed that you smoke Saturday is still sitting in your brain on Wednesday. So you add another complete dose of THC to what was there from the Saturday before. You smoke another joint the following Saturday, 25% of the THC from the Saturday when you smoked it on the Saturday before is still there, 50% from Wednesday. This gets pretty complicated. And then you're adding another full dose. So in a very, very short period of time, you're geometrically increasing the amount of THC that's collected in your brain. We start to see this, and there's one other thing that we start to see. We start to see a thickening of the cell wall.
What is the blue red?
That starts to cause a problem. The very first symptom of too much weed is you start to feel bored. You start to feel that things aren't normally interesting. And it's not because you live in the place that you live in and there's not enough to do, and it's not because you don't have an Xbox 360, and it's not because your truck's not running, and it's not because of this, that, or the other thing. You feel bored because it's becoming difficult for your brain to get messages through the cell wall back and forth and then off to wherever else it's sending a message to. It slows down your brain process. Now, if we bump this up a little bit more and get up to 1 time a day, which isn't to lots of people very much, 1 time a day, and your brain cells start to look like this. Plus the cell wall gets thicker, and it just becomes increasingly difficult for your brain to send messages back and forth. And what happens is that there's a whole series of changes that you start to go through from here to here. One of them is you start to have short-term memory problems. Short-term memory is really affected by marijuana, and it's affected because of the way that this drug accumulates in your brain. Your memory just can't function properly. When somebody's explaining something to you, or when you're doing something, what's supposed to happen is all the little parts of your brain that are responsible for memory are supposed to set up a relationship between the kinds of things that you're learning and long-term memory storage. And it just doesn't happen. It's so difficult for your brain to process information that all gets short-circuited. In order for your brain to respond to anything, it has to work so much harder. It's a little bit like, I mean, it's pretty easy for me to walk back and forth in here because there's nothing getting in my way. If I fill the room up knee-deep with mud, it becomes really difficult to move through the mud, and that's what you're doing to your brain when you start to smoke too much of this drug. It builds up in your brain, and it essentially creates brain sludge. Just makes it really, really difficult for your brain to do what it is that it's supposed to do. So your motivation goes down, your desire to do anything goes down. It becomes harder for you to pay attention to things. It becomes harder for you to get interested in new kinds of stuff. The only thing that you really get interested in is getting high. because that seems to be something that will excite you. That seems to be something that will get your attention, because it forces your brain to release brain chemicals that it can't release normally because you've plugged it up. Your frustration level goes up. You get angry more easily. Things that don't usually bother you will start to bother you. Situations that you used to be able to handle, all of a sudden you can't handle, so you get angry at things that you should be able to deal with. And ultimately, you start to care less about everything. Again, it's not because you're a bad person, it's not because you like to smoke weed that you stop caring about everything. It's not because you're a teenager. It's just because this drug interferes with the parts of your brain that allow you to process emotions and allow you to figure stuff out. You just can't do it anymore, so you basically give up. Now that you know a little bit more about marijuana, how it affects your brain, how it affects your body, ask yourself, like, are you being affected by too much brain sludge? If you think you are, if you're using this drug a lot, if you're starting to feel bored about everything else, you need to take a break from it. Take 2 or 3 days off. See how you feel. You're probably going to feel more energetic. You're probably going to feel a little bit more excited about your life. You'll realize that there's more going on than you thought there was. I say this lots. I'm not into that. I'm more into saying no, like understand what the heck it is that you're doing. And that way you really can make a decision. But if you're always doing stuff because they just said it's, you know, don't panic, it's organic, and that's the extent of your understanding of weed, that's not being fair to yourself. That's not giving yourself much to go on. Join us next week as we take a look at the life of Kirsten. Kirsten's been working on her recovery for the past few months, and she's finding that it's not quite as easy as she thought it was going to be.
Sometimes it feels like things are never going to get better, you know? I just feel really weak right now and alone.
Join us and find out that there's more than quitting drinking and using than just quitting drinking and using. Part of what recovering from drug and alcohol problems is all about is learning how to replace chemically changing how we feel with being able to use life to generate some good feeling.
My mood right now is just changing rapidly. Like 1 second I'm happy and the next I'm upset, and it stresses me out. But I think I just have way too much time.
And too much time's not a good thing.
No, it's not.
So let's find some things for you to do.
It's so hard to find things to fill my time with because all I did was smoke pot, and then I always have to be moving now or doing something.
So why do you think Ryan told you you need a job?
Spend too much time thinking about problems.
If you're into, I want to feel better right now, you're going to get frustrated. And if you get frustrated, it just kind of makes it harder for you to work on getting better.